Okay.
Bo, good to see you.
Good to see you, Paul.
Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat with me. I
Of
appreciate that
course.
because I know you've got a lot to keep you occupied at the moment. I want to kick off by asking you about a comment that you made when we were talking. It's a few weeks back now. You said to me, most users complain about real world experiences, not online experiences. That was quite an odd statement. I mean, what do you mean by that? Why is that important?
Well, I think about, the digital experience, right? Like a lot of the teams right now, especially in tech, are building for optimizing
Yeah, yeah.
digital workflows, digital experience. The real world used to be kind of our default, right? Like that was the only option. That was the only world. But now we have kind of like a gap between the real world, the internet, and everything in between. And when I said that, I was talking more so, coming from a background of like building, an AI IRL dating
Mhm.
app in college, 3 years. Kind of you notice that when you're going through customer reviews and then hearing feedback now too. And it's kind of like stuck with me, especially with working with like, teams and B2B. I'm starting to realize that ring true. And it's mostly predominantly because most teams, again, not just optimize for, workflows, but they ultimately try and, kind of like fix issues with features rather than like getting to the core problem and the core
Right.
foundational issue that usually comes from the real world experience, right? Like you can't control human nature. The two things that make sure that the real world flourish, and the two things that the real world flourishes on are reliability and trust. And you can't really build technology that controls human nature, and those two things are predominantly human related causes.
And how does that play out in the context of your business? I mean, just give us a
Mhm.
flavor of what you're trying to do about that. Because I mean, I take your point about the issue. Is what my next question is, well, what do you want to do about it then?
Right. So, the way I like to think about this problem is that in I used to say in 5 years. Well, now it's kind of 1 year from now. Software will not be judged by what it knows, how intelligent it is. It will be
Yeah.
judged by whether or not it can make something happen in the real world. And I think we were in an era where software, it was passive, right? You have a lot of like subscriptions,
Yeah.
SaaS, basically generational kind of like incumbents, making sure that they can kind of like capture that market share. Whereas now, like the ability to navigate, the real world has really been untouched. And it's really important for not only myself, but our team to kind of protect that real world experience, right? Like um,
Mm.
that human experience. And so that kind of touches, reservations, appointments, trips, tickets, services, and any
Right.
real world interaction,
Yeah.
all of it
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
become
Yeah.
programmable. So kind of the companies that define the next decade will, not just generate intelligence, they will operationalize it at global scale.
And in terms of your business, I mean, how's that going to
Mhm.
work in your? I mean, well, yeah, just give us a practical sense of the thing that because I know you're working on a particular issue, aren't you? I mean, just give us a sense of that.
Yes. So, because that real world experience will become programmable, that's kind of the future that we're building towards, right? So, over the next decade, AI will generate infinite intent. So that's user intent. So book this, schedule that, coordinate this, move this, buy this, get me here, set this up, handle this for me. And so intelligence is not that bottleneck, right? We as a company at Ophelia really focus on real world execution. So the physical world is still held together by these fragmented vendors, supplies, outdated
Yeah.
systems,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
phone calls, disconnected software, all that manual workflow and chaos. Like I quite plainly call it, operational chaos. And every real world action breaks across dozens of systems that were never designed to be working together, and they were never designed for autonomous workflows. So that is kind of what we focus on to ensure that there is a unified layer for every consumer app and consumer agent to essentially, have a simplistic tech stack that can cover full stack end-to-end orchestration between not only the supply chain that they have when they're dealing with providers or dealing
Mhm.
with suppliers, that's like your reservations and appointments, and then also their users, which are, the user information, those preferences, right? Like, does this person have a dog? Are they traveling with the dog? Are they traveling with kids? Like, is this a date or is this
Yeah.
just a regular dinner? Stuff like that.
And in terms of the applications that you're going to apply that to, I mean, is it, I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day about the difficulties around hospital uh,
Yeah,
emissions, people coming out of hospital and needing to go home or to care home. I mean, are you going
right.
to use it to apply to situations like that or dating? Or, I mean, what are the real world applications that you're looking to impact on?
Well, us as a team, we always say by 2030, we want every single IRL experience to route through our API. You know,
Okay. Big
that's a very,
ambition.
yeah, that's a very hefty goal. When we talk about like coordination, that's kind of like what we're talking about as well, right? Like we want to ensure that, not just like hospitals, are well functioning and help like, taken care of, but we do deal with healthcare providers, right? Like we deal with like multiple healthcare
Mhm.
platforms that connect users like the average you and me to a doctor or provider, whether that's an
Yeah. Yeah.
OBGYN, a regular, healthcare pediatrician or an optometrist. And it's really important for us to not only like make sure that the user's coordination between, our symptoms ourselves and our doctors are, well taken care of, but on the supply side, can a hospital receive an agentic request? We're not there yet, right? It's like that's the kind of future we're building towards because at some point, everyone is going to have their own LM. They're going to have their own agent, whether that's on
Yeah.
their phone, their computer. And I'm going to be able to type into ChatGPT and say, hey, book me my doctor's appointment for this Friday. Well, ChatGPT needs to not only, or Claude needs to be able to connect to the supply side of, okay, well, there's 5 different hospitals around me,
Yeah.
but which one is my actual primary care doctor, right? So it's like that kind of back and forth. Like we're trying to establish this road that agents can travel across, but not only agents, but consumer platforms, because for the longest
Yeah.
time, everything has been siloed.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tremendously big coordination challenge
Yeah,
that you're taking on.
yes, it is.
I mean, that must involve a lot of complexity and a lot of challenges. I mean, give us a
Yeah.
flavor of some of the things you've been dealing with.
You would not believe the issues that we have to deal with, right? Like, I think, because, again, we started off as an AI IRL dating app. It was kind of like first natured for us when we are building out this infrastructure. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of these consumer app teams are dealing with proxy management, bot detection, webhook block, CAPTCHA, bypass, all these different, like, issues on the back end that nobody ever sees unless you're building with it.
Right.
So what we found is that, if you're a dating app or you're a social platform or even just like a basic, AI agent, you're building your own product, right? Like you're building within your only subset of kind of like core values. If you're a dating app, why are you going to be building booking logic, right? Like that is not your team's job, right? Like you're focused on algorithms,
Yeah.
consumer, right, marketing, all that stuff, right? So when they set out to like build these, kind of execution and coordination protocols, like now they're not only dealing with that like back end logic and issues, they're also dealing with the supply chain, right? So that's real time availability. That's retry and fallback flows, payment rails, error recovery, timeout, refunds, like all these different like layers that no one really ever sees unless you've dealt with it and gotten your hands dirty. And like that's kind of where we started. So we've already, blessed that my engineers are coming from ex Uber. They have AI and LLM degrees, like with master's degrees, like all that stuff. And like I come from a highly technical and logistics and coordination background in politics. So it's kind of like the holy trinity and trifecta of, everyone's just complementing each other's skills.
Mm. I mean, I love to see that kind of ambition. I mean, I think that's absolutely
Thank you.
great. How did you get onto this path? I mean, because
Mm.
it's a bit of an odd career choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm like the classic founder that's like, I didn't really set out to be kind of a founder. I, care deeply about the human experience. I think it's very
Yeah.
obvious when tackling this deeply human issue. I think a lot of the tech community kind of sees this coordination issue and tries to optimize it, where that's kind of where my approach is different and where I think I've seen most success come from is because my background is deeply human. I knew how to code before coming into this, kind of like technical challenge. I studied philosophy at Boston College. Again, come from like a very political and like logistics and coordination campaigning background. So I understand humans. I understand how to mobilize someone from online to in person. And kind of being able to come from that approach has allowed me to get my hands and heart aligned with this company and this like challenge of like how do we ensure that the real world is protected when agentic reality sits in? And how do we ensure that these small businesses, not only in the physical world, right? So your brick and mortar restaurants, your hair salons, your optometrists, your
Mhm.
doctors, how can we protect them? And how can we allow them to also capitalize off agentic reality and commerce? And then how can we also ensure that, agents and, consumer apps can kind of like have this new era of, ability to execute in the real world, right? There's still a gap.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you'd studied philosophy and stuff. I mean, how would
Mm.
you say your personal values have
Right.
influenced the way that you've built the business? I mean, what's your sort of feelings about that?
Well, that's a great question. Well, I always like to tell my team, like, I'm very stoic. So I think, even coming from, you know, just a small town along, in Connecticut, I very much was able to deal with my thoughts and I was able to sit with
Mhm.
my thoughts and reflect. I think that's really important in business, right? Like, half of the issues that we have to actually sit with them. You can't
Yeah.
just like, kind of ignore them or move on to the next. You really do have to sit down and say, how do I fix this for not only myself and my team, but how do I fix this for the partners that we're serving, the users that are not only our users but the users that are coming through from the businesses that use us, right? Like, we have so many different branches of who we have to take care of, and the only way that I think that's possible is if you have a large amount of self-awareness. Maybe that's kind of one of my vices too. I'm constantly thinking about, perception. I'm constantly thinking about how I am showing up for others. But I think like my personal own philosophies have carried, and rang true in everything that I do. And that's, I am here to serve others. I, understand my place in this world pretty profoundly.
Mhm.
And I'm not really willing to sacrifice anything to compromise that and compromise those values. So I've carried that in business, how I carry my team. We operate together like a body of fish. We're all individual, but we are synced together and move together. And, philosophy has so many different parts. There's so many different layers. There's spirituality, there's, business practices, I'm just like very focused on self-improvement.
Yeah. And let me ask you about one aspect to that,
Mhm.
ethics. I mean, the thing
Yeah,
about AI is that it presents great opportunities,
absolutely.
but it also opens up some significant threats, doesn't it? I mean,
Absolutely.
what's your kind of take on the ethics of what you're doing?
Yeah. For us, it was very important for me to be AI for good, right? Like,
Yeah.
we are protecting the real world. We're kind of like this, if we're dealing with Superman, like, we're Superman, we're not Batman. We're not we're AI for good. And I think that has, been our main mission in all of this is that like we know agentic reality is here. We know that there are possible, futures for, detrimental impacts and consequences. But for us, again, because we sit in the middle, we serve not only consumer apps and agents, but we serve the supply side. So remaining neutral has been very important for us. Like, we're not trying to be a competitor to these consumer apps or agents, but we're also not trying to be the supply side. We're not a marketplace. So we don't really have skin in the game with like the supply. Like, we're not trying to be the next
Mm.
open table or Ticketmaster. We really are focused on serving humanity and the people. And, I think that, companies and tech companies especially, like, the result and the ethics of whether or not their company does something that's impactful and meaningful for the world is really contingent upon the leaders and the people operating the company. And I really make sure when I'm hiring people and also, just even surrounding myself with mentors and advisors that, they really understand who I am and they understand my goal and my vision for the
Mm.
next 10 years. And, only onboard and surround myself with people who have the same ethics as myself.
Mm. I mean, surrounding yourself with good people seems to me to be good advice across the
Yeah,
board, really.
I can
Um,
thank my parents. Yeah.
yeah, and to what extent would you say you've got a collaborative sort of mindset? I mean, is that how you see this, or do you see it as a win-lose?
Oh, I mean, I like to win. I'm not going to deny that I like to win. I am very relentless and I will not stop until I get my way. But I think that there is some power in that and in that, such that, even on Twitter, I'm constantly tweeting. I'm constantly asking people, I'm constantly asking the community and my friends, surrounding teams, like, what can I do to be better? Right? Like, even with our pricing model, I just tweeted like last night and I've gotten like already like 50 replies that I have to like go through of like, what do the people want, right? Like, the whole motto, like Paul Graham said it himself very well, like, build something that people want, right? And I already have my predictions for the future. For example, like with the tweet, I said, I predict, my theory is that subscriptions are going to be dead in a year or 5 years. And, what would you want to pay for? Because I know what I would want to pay for, and I don't like subscriptions. Like there's
Oh,
too many.
tell me, I mean,
Yeah.
that is going against conventional wisdom, isn't it? I mean, most people
Yeah.
love the idea of subscriptions
Oh,
forever.
they love it.
Why do you think that they're going to be dead? I mean, just give us a sense of your, sort of counter prevailing view on that.
Well, for the past like 10 years, right, consumer apps and platforms have monetized off attention.
Yeah.
It's engagement. You know, there's not really utility based in those metrics. So they can price, their business models off subscriptions. But subscriptions are dead. They're dead because they provide barely any utility. It's not success or merit based. Most of them don't even work. You can't keep track of them. But agents change that fundamentally, right? Like
And just
everything is
explain
based off
how
transaction.
and explain how they changed that though, because that's a really interesting take on this. Because what you're suggesting is that a lot of the SaaS businesses are toast.
Well, maybe don't tell them that, but yeah, I personally believe that a lot of SaaS will die. Not in, traditional standards where it's like, okay, like everyone better watch out. But I think we've already noticed that with Anthropic, right?
Yeah.
A lot of SaaS is just a lot of UI, and a lot of consumer apps are the same thing. It's just a lot of UI and front end, design wrapped around like basic, feature sets. It's not really doing anything. It's not providing any actual outcome. And not only that, but these apps and people and teams that are using that SaaS and using those apps, can't really track their success rates, right? They can't track any valuable data. So agents change that fundamentally because they're actually executing things. So when an agent is executing and fulfilling an actual request in the real world, right? So
Mhm.
set up a doctor's appointment. If I show up to my doctor's office and my appointment is not set, that is a failure, right? That is a
Yeah.
huge fundamental failure. Remission rates are 3 times higher when delayed appointments are scheduled. So, stuff like that where there's real world outcomes and consequences to failure states is something that changes the game, right? Like now you can price your model and business model
Yeah.
off of like success rates, confirmations, and that's all transactional. So it's all usage-based pricing now. But again, the margins are smaller there. Like it's not as reliable. It means that you actually have to build a product that is very good and is better than other people's.
Yeah. I'm glad you like a challenge.
Oh, I love it. It's like I wish I didn't, but I do love a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, because you've got one, I think. And
Yeah,
let me ask you about the way you're building the business. I mean,
sure.
has the business, because I know you're making quite a lot of progress, has the business kind of grown past your expertise at any point?
Well, I always like to say you should surround yourself with smarter people always.
Mm,
So I think even if it were to surpass my expertise, that I ensure and make sure that I surround myself with people who know what to do. But I also think in every company, right? Like you start off with an issue and it kind of snowballs into something that you
mm,
weren't expecting it for it to snowball into. And you kind of just have to like figure it out. That's why I love startups, is because it doesn't matter what you know now, because what you'll know in the end will
yeah,
fundamental fully
yeah,
like triumph whatever you started off with. So no, I surround myself with like engineers who know more than I do, advisors, people with like not just like very I think like like streamlined states of consciousness. No, like I surround myself with people from fintech, from AI LM building, from API building, from consumer. Like
right.
we're not siloed into like one category. We serve
Mm.
a whole lot of verticals, and I actually prefer it because I get to learn more.
Yeah, and let me ask you, have you had any real surprises? I mean, because I mean, what you described to me sounds really a really exciting way forward.
It's yeah.
But I bet there have been some things that have happened. You thought, well, I didn't think that would quite happen. Have you had any of those surprises?
Yeah, it depends on the day. If we're talking about good ones, I really wasn't expecting like a lot of like I guess like the agentic boom that happened in the past like month. I'm really shocked by like kind of like the reciprocity of like the market. I hate saying like the market when it's like to me it's like team members, right? Like there's teams and devs that are out there who want to use our technology and want to even just test it and give us feedback. So I'm very shocked by that because again, coming from like 3 years of me kind of like shouting from the rooftops, like, hey, execution and coordination in IRL is going to be the future. Like,
Mm,
it's not just going to be another app. Like another consumer app will not fix this. This needs to be a very like, unified layer underneath that sits like kind of like an operating system amongst all of it. But then, bad things, I mean, sure, like there's so many different problems that have come up and I'm like, oh, I don't know how to fix this, or oh my gosh, like what
Mm.
am I gonna do? But those are all temporary.
Yeah. Yeah. They are a bit never ending, has been my experience. I mean, you sort one out and then another one arrives 2 minutes later. Um,
That's life.
and in terms of making, I mean, you talked about making mistakes just then. I mean, what would you say has been the biggest mistake that you've made?
How much time we have, Paul? Um, I make a lot of mistakes, and I think that's like the reason why I'm in startups because you can make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's the one job path that probably allows you to and then champions you to make mistakes. I don't even see them as like failures. I see them as like, okay, like it's an experiment, right? This doesn't work, you try another thing. That's why I love to build. But I think one of the most recent biggest mistakes that I've made have just been, most of them have just been hiring, right? Like, you know, finding those people that are going to be with you in the long run, right? Like
Yeah.
startups aren't a fleeting game. They are a long-term
Yeah.
play
Recruiting's
that
hard, isn't it?
right. And you need to know and be able to decipher. It's like it's kind of like dating. Like, how can you possibly know, who's going to stick with you for 10 years with just
So
meeting
how
them
do you,
in
I
a
mean,
month?
that's a very good point. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, I mean, what's
Yeah.
your strategy for working out who the right ones are?
Well, kind of like dating, you can vet them. You can vet people.
Right.
So whether that's a reference or who going through mutuals, like it's always nice and better to date someone that, you already kind of know. I don't believe in hiring friends. I don't think that unless you know your friend is going to be able to execute the job well, I tend to just stray away from that. But also just like finding exceptional talent that I love placing bets on people. The
Right.
best people in life and the reason why that I'm here is because people have placed bets on me. So if I can try and find that same value system, but also intelligence in another person, I will bet on you. Doesn't matter what school you went to. Part of some of the best engineers that I've met did not come from highly technical, kind of like MIT, Worcester, even like Waterloo. Like those are very niche, there's some great engineers at state schools that didn't have the chance or opportunity to pay for incredible universities like that. So I was able, I take all different approaches. I take them from, our investors who give us recommendations, mutuals, and then also just me recruiting, right? Like I'm on Twitter. I can see what you're building. I go through GitHub. I check all of that. I'm very hands-on. And so, talking with those people and seeing what they've built before, I don't care, how much research you've done. I care if you can ship a product within a week when I tell you our vision and our timeline and our partners' feedback. Like, can you build something and do it now and do it right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
once you've got people on board, as it will, when you've, I mean, to quote the famous book, when you've got the right people on the bus,
Hmm.
how do you create an environment that enables them to kind of thrive and to do their best work? And more importantly, how do you equip your team to make decisions when you're not around?
Great question. Culture is everything. Culture is
Mm.
everything to me because I also want to enjoy what I'm doing as well,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah, yeah.
I I believe that when you're having fun, it doesn't feel like work. And that's probably why most founders seek out being a founders because like they want to enjoy what they're doing and they want to find meaning in it. For me, it's again, you got to find high agency people. You have to find self-sufficient people who can do and execute by themselves that don't rely on someone overhead, those managerial middlemen being like, hi, you need to go do this today and you need to hit this benchmark. One of the best pieces of advice that I received was from Built Rewards founder, actually like this past like week or so. And he said, have daily wins, right? We all have Slack channels, we have teams, we have emails, like make sure that everyone on your team can communicate and express their daily win, whether that's, oh, I shipped this product or I fixed
Yeah.
this bug or we hit this financial benchmark. Traditional KPIs are great for tracking data, but they're not good for fostering motivation.
No, they're
So
not.
I think
That's
that
right. That's very true.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, and I found that even just like in the shift of my team and I doing that, right? Like we all have our individual departments, but when we get to see each other's wins like every day, it's kind of like one, it's fun, it's celebratory, But then too, you get to like finally see that like there are other people working just as hard as you are, and it motivates you to do better. And it's not just like the vacations, the offsites, or, like I can't wait to get to that weekend, right? Like, no, you're really like, no, we're building together. We're in this together. We're
Mm. Mm.
kind of going off to war. The famous saying is like, oh, like, you gotta kind of like look to your left, look up above you, see, who like, it's a sniper, right? Like you're constantly, trying not to die. And I think when you're trying not to die, maybe with people who are, you know, family and just as, your friends as they are your teammates, like it makes everything worthwhile,
Yeah.
for
Well,
me
I'm
at
glad I'm
least.
glad you're not going to die. That's pretty
No,
positive.
we're not. Yeah.
Good. Let me ask you about the flip side, though. I mean,
Sure.
what about when you've got to make decisions that are going to make you unpopular?
Oh, but see, I'm used to being unpopular. So that doesn't really, I'm actually one of the only few, I think like at least female founders or just like founders and maybe just people, personalities. My default is usually people just don't like me. I have a very polarizing personality. People
And
don't understand
why would
me.
you say that? I mean, just tell me why would you say that? Because that seems an odd thing. That's not how I perceived it.
It kind of is, right? I've like been grappling with it. Most of it comes from a very contrarian. I say one thing and I can change my mind 2 seconds later. It's because I have a million thoughts racing through my head. It's because I'm very blunt. I'm straightforward. I don't really, it's not that I don't have time to like sugarcoat things, but it's just more of like, that's just like who I am. Truth is very important to me, accountability, authenticity. And I don't mean authenticity of like, oh, I like who I am. No, I mean like, if someone were to say, I hate you, or like, oh, or project onto me some, negativity, I can sit there and say, I don't like that about myself either, right? But, I'm okay with it. I forgive, I have grace for myself. And I think that's like very odd. I think that's strange. Most people are very insecure and then hide it and try to like,
Mm.
fake it till they make it. And I'm just like, no, it's who I am. If I don't know something today, then I might tomorrow. If I don't know something, then I'm going to fully admit to it. And, a lot of people on Twitter, I find that's funny that you asked this because a lot of people on Twitter love to try and humble me. I got this saying, I tweeted that like pricing thing of like, oh, I have a theory, and someone said, I bet you thought you were super smart and thought you ran with that. And I was like, you know what? Like, I actually just wanted to know people's thoughts, right? Like,
Mm.
I actually wasn't trying to sound smarter than I was. I really just wanted to hear feedback and I enjoy conversation. And I think people are surprised, hopefully most of the times pleasantly surprised that I'm very human, like I really am. And I'm very much a people person. And I think that's not traditional in tech.
Mm. Well, I'm glad you're human. I'm glad you don't want to die. That's real positive. Let me ask
Yeah.
you about the one of the challenges around building businesses is we have this
Yeah.
phrase in the UK, which is, working on the business, not just in the business. I mean, how do
Yeah.
you carve out mental space to kind of work on the business rather than being kind of embroiled in all
Yeah.
the challenges involved in building the business? I mean, what's your take on how you create if it's kind of thought space, actually? I mean, how do you create time to do that, space to do
It
that?
is. And that kind of goes back to like the philosophy part of your question of like,
Mm.
how does philosophy carry over into your business practices? I think that's one of them. Nighttime, I am a night person through and through.
Right.
I sit with my thoughts and I sit through, I'm a very, because of my team, because like, I have two other, founding team engineers who are able to be kind of in the weeds and, more of like the systems based, I'm very visionary. I know where we have to be. I see it in my head. I work backwards from that. So I know where we have to be and how do we get there? Well, we have to do X, Y, Z. When I think about the business side of things, instead of like being in it and kind of taking a step away from it, I think that's where like mentorship comes in. I have a lot of great mentors and I
Right.
have a lot of great people surrounding me who have done this before, who can answer my questions and who can give me the best practical advice. While they're not the ones doing it and executing it, they can like kind of gear me and
Yeah.
directionally put me in the
Yeah.
right way.
Yeah.
But when I think about business, I don't march to the beat of anyone else's drum. I'm gonna do it, and if I make a mistake, then I'm gonna have to deal with it. But in terms of like thinking through how I want to approach business, there's great books, I read, but also again, it comes from reflection. Like, can you sit and kind of reflect on, you know, all of the different branches that are a part of your business. And again, our duty is to return, and the duty is to our shareholders, is the famous saying, but our duty is also to the people
Yeah.
or effectively going
Yeah.
to be impacted by our technology.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you reflect. I mean, because reflecting seems to me is really another way of saying think. So
Yeah.
thinking seems to be a pretty good thing to be doing in business because if you don't think about things, you
Well,
never
I'd
get
hope so.
it wrong. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right about that. Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned mentors. I mean,
Mhm.
give me an example of a great piece of advice you've been given.
See, there's so much great advice that like is thrown at me, but I'm going to bring this back to I could talk about incredible investors at Andreessen that have helped mentor me throughout this entire
Mm.
process for fundraising. There's different scenarios that I go for different people, but um, I'm going to bring this down and ground it towards my parents.
Right.
I am very close with my parents. I'm very close with my family and my friends. My circle of friends have been with me since kindergarten, since like I've been, in middle school, high school. But my parents have fundamentally engraved, a very good moral system. I'm Catholic, I'm deeply spiritual.
Mm.
Um, and I think that that carries through in my decision making. While, at the end of the day, when, when all of this is over, I don't get to take with me to heaven all the money that we make. I don't get to,
Mm.
show God or whoever, or even if it's not God, I don't get to like bring any of the
Mm.
experiences that I've had on this earth with me. So it's really important for me to just be a good person. And you can define good in a whole plethora of ways. I resonate, I mean, if you're not even familiar with Plato, but I really resonate with, to be good is to be virtuous and to be the best, truly best you can be, not only merit wise, but also just morals wise. And I will truly do anything for others. And I'm here to serve humanity.
Mm.
And I'm here to serve, you know, the best that I can to ensure that the world becomes a better place and or is just in a better standing than it was before
Mm.
I came
Mm.
and was
I mean, it's
philosophy.
interesting that you refer to people like Plato and Socrates, which of course they were at the birth of civilization, really, weren't they?
Absolutely.
It's interesting that those ideas have kind of stood the test of time, I think.
Because they're
Um,
so true. And like that is why like, I think like a lot of the tech people get turned off by philosophy and the humanities, but if you don't have a blend of the two, you can't really apply and have the most
mm,
maximum,
mm.
I think, human experience and you can't build as well.
Yeah, yeah. Has your experience over the last sort of few years, has that changed your view of what good leadership is? Has that
Yeah.
developed?
It's definitely developed. I mean, I have never had a corporate job in my life. I have only worked on startups or small grassroots initiative teams. I have experienced a lot of bad leaders. I've been under them, I've worked under them, I've had to, make up for their work and their lack of thereof. And I think like everyone experiences being a part of a bad team before, right? Like you have the
Mm,
classic like school experience. But I think even just noticing in tech, right? Like, and even behind the scenes with business, especially the way people conduct business and, like business is a very much relationships industry. So it's very easy to get kind of drowned in the chaos and the noise and
mm,
the hype, especially in startups, right? Like everyone wants the same investors. It's really, really important for me to trust the people that I'm working with. And the only way that you can trust someone is if you know that they're good. And I've developed a very, very good, I'm very intuitive. I've developed a very good eye for who I can and can't trust. And let's say in, a couple of years, I'm proven to be wrong, then okay, then I can't really fix that, right? It's already, the deed is done. But
mm,
I need to make sure that in 5, 10 years, or whenever it is, when I'm done with, whatever action or decision that I've made, I need to be able to sit with myself. It's kind of like, and I hate to be bringing up these books, but it's like Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Like
mm,
you need to be able to weigh and sit with your conscience. And for some people, there's a lot of, the classic stereotype is that there's a lot of psychopaths in business and in tech, but I don't like to approach it like that. I like to approach it like, can I sit down with my investors at a dinner and enjoy my conversation with them? Can I sit with my engineers at 2 in the morning when all of us are delirious and tired and still want to be anywhere else? And would I want to be anywhere else or would I want to be right there with them?
mm, mm.
And that's who I choose to surround myself with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it sounds pretty powerful experience actually. Um,
Yeah.
and very, but what's going through my mind is that's quite difficult to sustain in the longer term, isn't it? I mean, it sounds very, pretty full on and very powerful. How do you sustain that in the longer term, though?
I hope that I can, right? I think entrepreneurship is very much just as much of a identity game as it is a
Mm.
business game. If you cannot develop the skills, right? Like logically, it's like, okay, you have to develop the skills to be able mm, to perform at your like maximum capacity. So that's like developing skills, like managerial skills, like all these different like
Yeah.
little like tool
Yeah.
sets that you can have in your toolkit. But I think for me, it's also an identity thing, right?
So,
Like
so do
six,
you identify? Sorry, let me just pick that point up. So, would you, if somebody said to you, "What are you?" You would say, "I'm an entrepreneur." I mean, is that how you
yeah,
identify yourself? I mean, I identify myself
yeah,
as a mountaineer. I mean, I think I said that to you when I first met you.
yeah,
I mean, do
yeah.
you identify as an entrepreneur? Is that a really strong sort of identity for you? Because I mean, when we first spoke, I thought maybe you're a philosopher, not an entrepreneur. I mean, how do you see that?
Yeah, to your point, I don't ever refer to myself as an entrepreneur. I don't even think of myself as one,
Because
even
why
though
is that?
I think it's because I think being an entrepreneur comes with a badge, right? It's a badge of honor to me.
Right,
And that's like saying like, do soldiers kind of like see themselves as a soldier? Well, they only really consider themselves a soldier after their basic training and they get their final badges in their ranks.
right,
I see myself in the same way. I don't think I'll consider myself an entrepreneur ever. Maybe if we were to exit or IPO or, later down the road, if you were to ask me in 5 years, hey, Bo, do you think of yourself an entrepreneur? Maybe. But right now, I don't. Right now, I consider myself a founder. And even then, I don't even consider myself a founder. I consider myself a businesswoman. Um,
right.
and that's like what I'm focused on.
And
I,
let me ask you then, what's the difference between saying I'm a businesswoman, I'm a founder, or I'm an entrepreneur? I mean, how do you see the differences between those things? Because most people probably wouldn't differentiate. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but what's your take on why being a businesswoman is such an important thing and being an entrepreneur is less important thing in terms of your identity? Why would you say that?
right. Well, the three can coexist, but I'd say for me, being a founder is like being a builder. Anyone can build
Right.
anything, but not everyone can make something that people want and will pay for. That's
Yeah.
business. I
Yeah.
consider myself a businesswoman because I know
Right.
how to get deals done. I know how to close deals. I know how to put the business first, right? Like as much as like a product, I am a founder. Some days I am a businesswoman. The other, I am an entrepreneur in totality. I think entrepreneur is it's kind of synonymous with businesswoman, but I think entrepreneurs like it's to me it's like a past tense title. Like
Right.
entrepreneur is like you've already done the thing. You've already maximized your it's a badge, right? Like you've
So kind of old
maximized your
guys like me, you
business.
mean?
Not even like there's some people who have like built businesses and sold them, and then I would therefore consider them an entrepreneur, right? It's like, but for me, it's like identity isn't it's not static, it's
Mm.
fluid. And for me right now, my focus is like, how can I be and act as a founder and as a CEO that has a $30 million company, right? Like, how can I act as that person and not the scrappy
Mm.
founder that I was like a couple years ago that had like no money and it's still I still operate
Mm.
with the same principles. I am a very lean operator. I'm very meritocracy based. I come from very small town. Like, I very much care about how can we effectively use money and not
Mm.
just blow it all? I think a lot of founders nowadays are just focused on hype. They're focused on attention, where I think that's like not effective long-term,
Mm.
strategy for, again, like this agentic reality and this new set of generational companies. I want to be a company. I don't want to be,
Yeah.
a
And,
business.
and let me ask you about thinking long term. I mean, that's pretty difficult. No, it's a
Yeah.
good thing to do to think long term. It's pretty difficult when there's this amount of change happening. I
Right.
mean, I mean, I mean, give us a, how do you? I mean, you've just said that you want to think long term. I mean, how do
Right.
you do that? Given that it's so, I mean, the world is so unpredictable at the moment. I mean, what's your take on how do you make how do you get that long term? How do you build that long term vision into some in a situation which is really fluid?
to your, and again, like bringing it back to like how the same way, like how the Platonian and Socrates, like
Mm.
morals and values have rang true for centuries.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's the same thing, right? Like there are certain things about companies, there are certain things about teams and humanity that just will always stay true.
Right.
And focusing on those aspects and fundamentals and first principles ultimately allow you to stay in the game long term. Obviously, there's strategies, there's different like power plays that you can make to be a long-term player. But I think what's rang true is to always stick with first principles, to learn from your mistakes, and to make sure that your morals stay the same throughout this entire process. For me, it's always been always about, like contributing to humanity, right? Right?
Mm.
We can think long term because, humanity will consistently stay the same until at least like for my existence, right? Like I only have like what, 80 more years, 90 more years. So I think by then, I don't think humanity will change like intrinsically and internally. Maybe like externally, right? Like technology will change, physical businesses and infrastructure will change, but who we are as like a
Mm.
mankind will not.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you think it won't change too much. I mean, that's quite encouraging. It would be interesting to see whether that's true, but
Yeah.
that's good to hear. And you just mentioned mistakes. I mean, what would you say has been the biggest mistake you've made? And what did you learn?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I make like in the beginning, I used to make a lot of like timing mistakes, right? Like I would spend too long on certain things. I would
Mm.
spend not enough time on the others. I think now I'm still trying to grapple this as like someone who's, transitioning from just like a founder of like a couple
Mm.
people to now like we're scaling out and like building a team. Um the challenge is now like how can I manage my time? So to
Mm.
your point, like how can you think long term? Well, I really only try and focus on myself, my team, and what I have to get done, right? Like I think of it as like, okay, this is what I have today, this is what I have to do tomorrow. Like switch, this is what I have a task, switch. Like there's a priority list of things that I need to get done.
Mm.
And if they don't get done, then the people that are relying on me
So it's
are,
focus. You're
going to be
talking about
upset.
focus.
Right. I think that's, yeah. And like a lot of the mistakes that I've made have been because of a lack of focus or because of a lack of time. Time is the one thing, time is money. So,
Mm. Time's the one
yeah,
non-renewable. I mean, you can make money, you
yeah.
can lose money, but time, and once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. And there's just so many different like burners that are going. You have five burners going.
Mm.
Whether you have five burners, you shouldn't have all five running. There's no such thing as work-life balance. And, the people who say that they do are lying, or they have a very good team around them that, takes the other burner and can run with it. I think for me, my biggest focus is like obviously myself, my team, and my company, but also my family, my friends, my relationships. If I'm focusing on my relationships,
Mm.
and maybe this is why I'm still single to this day, but, like if I'm focusing on romance and relationships, then, the business is, something is happening and that I'm not focusing on, or something on the business is working, I'm not seeing my family or talking to them as much, which is not the ideal scenario. So it's just a give and take. There's going to be ebbs and flows, different eras, experiences, etc.
Yeah. Let me ask you a couple of last questions before we wind up, because I mean,
Sure.
I think your point about focus is
Yeah.
really. I mean, I have spoken to entrepreneurs that don't think that way, but I'm a
Hmm.
huge believer in focus. I mean,
Yeah,
you
me too.
do less and do it better would be my
Yeah,
philosophy, which is sort of similar to
absolutely.
what you're saying, really. Let me ask you, if you were starting again, if you were to go back to the beginning, if you were starting from scratch, what would you do differently?
I think about this all the time because I'm like a very much past. I'm as much as I am a very future oriented person, I'm a very much past
Right.
nostalgic person as well. If I could start over, well, obviously technicality wise, I would use a lot more AI. But I think fear is a huge issue that a lot of founders and
Now,
first time
you
founders
don't
deal
strike
with.
me as somebody who has a lot of fear.
See, a lot of people say that to me, right? Like I don't come across, I am okay.
You
I'm very
strike me as
fearless.
fearless. You strike me as pretty fearless. I mean, I don't know you that well,
Yeah.
but when we've spoken before, I've not come away and thought, oh, she's scared.
Yeah. Well, I I'd say it's kind of like I'm very courageous.
Right.
I'm not fearless. I have fears. It's whether or not you let them get to you.
Okay.
I have them, but I don't let them control me.
So it's in here then. It's all about you taking
Yes.
charge.
Yes. And I think that my mistakes in the beginning were because I let them control me. I
Right.
stalled out and like, did I stall out for years? No. Thank God. Maybe it's a week, but that's one week that I could have been working. I am very much on, your thoughts. Like think of your mind as like a sky, and the clouds are just thoughts. You can
Mm,
have bad ones and good ones, but they will always pass. So it's better to just be the sky and let the weather pass through.
mm,
You just remain neutral. And I've kept that kind of like approach in my how I deal with my thoughts. And I, no matter what, want to just become a champion. I want to be a champion in the end. I want to win.
mm,
And the best way to kind of get over your fears is through action and to take action and to just be honest, right? Like, if something's not going well, just be honest. People would rather have you be transparent than wait and wait and wait and
mm.
find out like hours or days or years from then. And I've gotten kind of over that like fear and hump of, again, being blunt and being straightforward and being like, this is what's going on, whether or not you can fix it or not, like I don't have control over it, right? Like you don't have
Mm,
control over certain things.
mm.
You have a control a lot of things, but not everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think your point about controlling your thoughts is a really well made one. I mean, this idea of positive things and negative things just being clouds that will pass. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of truth in that. I think that's an illustration of your kind of philosophical thinking coming through, actually.
I
So
mean, perhaps, yeah. I mean, optimist, the classic optimist make money. And again, you can
yeah,
only be as deep as you've experienced and felt. I prefer to be a deep person, so you have to be able to go there.
yeah, yeah. A great piece of advice, both on which to end. Thank you for making
Yeah,
time to kind of talk about what you're doing. I mean,
of
I think it's a
course.
fantastic proposition, fantastic, and I love the ambition as well. I mean,
Thank
one of the
you.
things I love is talking to people that have big ambitions. They don't always
Yeah,
achieve them, but it's great to see people getting stuck in and trying to change stuff that matters. So thank you for making a bit of time to
always.
come and talk to us. I mean, I really appreciate that, and look forward to
Of
catching up with you again
course.
at some point.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to that too.
Cheers, Bo. Bye bye.
Bye.